Welcome back, and now for the news in detail. Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan says the world powers, including the US and Russia, know what is happening in occupied Kashmir. In an interview, Khan said the struggle for the rights of the Kashmiris will continue until the goal is achieved. Kashmiris are living under curfew since India unilaterally revoked the occupied valley special status on 5th of August. US President Donald Trump has offered to mediate between Islamabad and New Delhi to resolve the crisis, but India has not accepted the offer. The international community has also urged India to lift restrictions and restore normalcy in the occupied valley. Pakistan says India is being run on the principles of terrorism, racism and xenophobia under the sham garb of democracy. In Pakistan's first right for reply, UN Representative Zulkarnain Sheena rebutted New Delhi's response to Prime Minister Imran Khan's speech at the UN General Assembly. Sheena said the accusation of terrorism are rich coming from a country whose spy was caught in Pakistan and confessed to terrorism and espionage. He said India claimed that Article 370 was revoked for the development of Kashmir, but the valley is facing a clampdown for the last 2 months. Sheena questioned why India is afraid of letting Kashmiris speaking their minds and let the world know about their plight.
A country which is in the iron grip of the fascist RSS, which was thrice banned in India for terror-related charges, has the audacity to point fingers towards others.
He said India does not have the moral courage to respond to the UN's report on human rights abuses in the occupied valley. Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan's speech is being celebrated in Indian-occupied Kashmir. Kashmiris defied New Delhi's lockdown with firecrackers, cheering and chanting slogans after Khan advocated for their cause at the UN General Assembly. The speech convinced Kashmiris that they are not alone and abandoned by the world. The people of Indian-occupied valley were overjoyed that their voice was heard at the highest international forum. Indian activist Shala Rashid said there were rallies, firecrackers and celebrations after Imran Khan's speech at the UN. On Twitter, Kashmiris living abroad confirmed the reports, saying Khan has given the caged people of the valley a reason to smile. New Delhi imposed crushing curfew and communications blackout that has entered its 56th consecutive day. Over 1 million votes have so far been counted after polling in Afghanistan's presidential election. Observers say the elections were marred by low turnout, violence, technical glitches and voter fraud. The Afghan Defense Ministry says 5 security personnel were killed and 37 civilians were wounded in 68 attacks during Saturday's presidential polls. The details in this report.
Millions of Afghans went to the polls to elect the war-torn country's new leader. The election was postponed twice due to peace talks between the Taliban and the US in Doha. More than 70,000 security personnel were deployed across the country to counter the Taliban, who had threatened to target polling stations. This was the 4th presidential election in Afghanistan since 2001. Voters hope the election will bring peace to the country after decades of conflict.
All the Afghan people, including myself, long for real peace to be realized in our country. I am full of expectations of my candidate. I believe he has got great plans for pushing forward the peace process and bringing peace back to this nation.
Some voters say the new president should focus on education and infrastructure development.
For the future leader, become a good country, a developed country, and should bring the peace for us. For those that there are more educations, more constructions. Yeah, this is our expectation from our coming leaders.
18 candidates, including President Ashraf Ghani and Chief Executive Abdullah Abdullah, are vying for the top slot. The Election Commission of Afghanistan is expected to announce the results in 3 weeks.
Moving on to Syria, where Aleppo Governor Hussein Daib says militants are executing civilians who try to leave the Idlib clash zone. Speaking to reporters, Daib said a humanitarian corridor had been opened with the Russian-Syrian Reconciliation Committee. He said illegal armed groups are still hampering the evacuation of people and using civilians as a human shield. The governor said last week the rebels executed 5 people who tried to approach the corridor's zone. More than 900 violations of the zone were registered in September, which left over 100 people dead and injured. Syria has demanded immediate withdrawal of the US and Turkish troops from the country. The United States has around 1,000 troops tackling ISIS militants in Syria. Addressing the UN General Assembly, Foreign Minister Walid al-Muallim said Syria has the right to take action if the US and Turkey refuse to withdraw troops. Washington and Ankara have started joint land and air patrols along a part of Syria's border with Turkey to establish a safe zone. Al-Muallim said there should be no deadlines for a UN-mediated constitution committee formed to find a settlement to the civilian war. He said Syrian people should lead and own the process. Clashes between the government forces and pro-democracy protesters led Syria into civil war in 2011. Israeli security forces have detained 8 Palestinians in early morning raids in southern West Bank. Palestinian officials said Israeli soldiers detained 6 men during a raid in Dura town. They said the forces also detained 2 men, including a teenager, in Idna town. Meanwhile, Israeli soldiers removed by force several Palestinian and international activists holding a non-violent sit-in near the shore of northern Dead Sea. The activists were protesting against Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's pledge to annex the West Bank. Palestinian officials said several people were injured during the raid. Sudan's new Prime Minister Abdullah Hamdok has urged the US to remove Khartoum from its list of states sponsoring terrorism. Speaking at the UN General Assembly, he said Sudan is entering a new phase after the toppling of dictator Omar al-Bashir in April. Hamdok said sanctions imposed by Washington are causing tremendous suffering to the Sudanese people. He assured the General Assembly that New Sudan is not a threat to any nation. Sudan was designated a state sponsor of terrorism in 1993 under the then US President Bill Clinton. The designation makes the country ineligible for debt relief and funding from international institutions, also limiting foreign investment. Austrians are voting today in snap parliamentary elections following the collapse of the coalition government in May. Opinion polls show former Chancellor Sebastian Kurz's People's Party is far ahead by roughly 1/3 of the vote. But Kurz still needs a coalition partner to secure majority, and it remains unclear whom he will pick. Kurz's election campaign focused on a Judeo-Christian identity. The country is currently being governed by a non-partisan caretaker government of technocrats. Coalition with the far-right Freedom Party fell apart after a video sting scandal. The scandal was labeled Ibiza-gate after the Spanish island where the video was recorded. In Turkey, women's rights activists have taken to the streets in Istanbul against the government's failure to stop rising violence against women. The protest started after the murder of Amin Bulut by her former husband last month. Protest organizers said the killing of women has spiked over the last few months. According to a rights group, 294 women were murdered in Turkey in the first 8 months of this year. 440 women were killed last year. Turkey has ratified the Council of Europe's 2011 Istanbul Convention on Preventing Domestic Violence. It's a time for a short break, but coming up next in the bulletin. Zimbabwe's founding leader buried. New chocolate line consists of 100% cacao. Welcome back. 36 people have been killed and several others injured after a bus crashed into a truck in China. The bus was carrying 69 people when the accident happened on an expressway in Jiangsu province. Police said the bus broke through the barrier dividing the two lanes on a motorway. They said an initial investigation suggests the accident was caused by a burst tire. Among the 36 injured, 9 have been declared critical and rushed to the hospital. 44 people have been killed in flooding following torrential rains in India's northern Uttar Pradesh state. Officials say thousands others have moved to the relief camps in view of more heavy rains predicted for next 48 hours. Densely populated regions on the banks of the state's two main rivers were worst hit. Officials said most people lost their lives in accidents of house collapse, drowning, lightning and snake bites. Earlier this week, flash floods killed at least 17 people in western India's Maharashtra state. In South Korea, a huge explosion on an oil tanker has injured 18 people at the southeastern port of Ulsan. Authorities say the fire spread to another tanker docked nearby. Coast Guards have rescued 46 people from the two vessels, and officials said no repair or loading operations were underway at the time of the explosion. Two people have been killed after a roller coaster carriage derailed in Mexico City. Officials say 5 others were injured in the accident at a popular amusement park. According to an eyewitness, the victims fell to the ground when the last carriage came off the tracks. The popular park was closed soon after the incident. Authorities are now investigating the cause of the derailment. The UN's refugee agency says a boat carrying over 50 migrants has capsized off the coast of Libya in the Mediterranean Sea. The United Nations High Commission for Refugees said a rescue operation is underway to save the refugees. Meanwhile, Alarm Phone, an independent support group, said another boat carrying nearly 60 migrants went missing in the same area. They said the migrants were hoping to cross the Mediterranean Sea to reach Europe. Last week, the EU partnered with the Coast Guard and other Libyan forces to stop the dangerous sea crossings. Zimbabwe's founding leader, Robert Mugabe, has been buried in his home village of Kutama. He died in a Singapore hospital on 6th of September at the age of 95. In the 1970s, Mugabe led a 7-year rebellion against the white minority government in former Rhodesia. He then served as the founding Prime Minister of Zimbabwe from 1980 to 1987. Mugabe tightened his grip on power, ruling as president for 30 years. He was overthrown by the military in 2017. The famed San Francisco chocolatier Barry Callebaut has created a new way of making chocolate using not just the beans but the whole cocoa fruit. His company says its new chocolate trend is tastier, nutritious and fruitier. More in this report.
Chefs at world's largest cocoa producers, Barry Callebaut, love creating delicious chocolates that not only delight the eye, but also the palate. In the modern age, consumers want to use whole grains, less sugar, more nutrients, and cause less harm to the environment. The chocolatier unveiled a new chocolate line called Whole Fruit Chocolate that packs in cocoa beans and also parts of the fruit tossed away earlier. The Callebaut CEO, Antonio Decent, said 70% of cacao fruit is discarded as waste while making chocolate.
The sugar comes from the fruit, from the pulp of the fruit. The structure comes with the fibers. The taste comes, of course, from the cocoa beans. So it's a chocolate that's made only 100% from the fruit itself.
Pour savoir ce qu'on pouvait en faire.
The new chocolate line will come in 2 types, one consisting of 100% cacao and another mixing in milk with no refined sugar added.
I'm a dark chocolate person, and I think this went 100 times more than a regular.
Decent said the company is looking forward to offering new recipes to Nestle, Hershey, and Unilever.
And now the weather situation from around the globe. And that's all for now. Further updates, stay tuned to Indus.